Hey guys, it's Austin. I'm going to do another wintertime structure video. This is going to be focused on points, everything you know about them, the differences, and how I go about dissecting the lake. With that being said, this will be the last video geared towards winter fishing. The next ones will be more towards springtime, the transitional period, and then gearing up to the spawn. Just like my last videos, if you want to see how I kind of break the lake down in different sections and how it fishes, check out my creek channel and channel swing video, and I'll kind of go over that. So without further ado, we will hop right into the points. Okay, so a point is probably the easiest thing to identify when you're fishing. By definition, it is just a piece of land that juts out from a larger piece of land. So basically have two styles of points. You have a main lake point and a secondary point. So they're kind of what they sound like. A main lake point is something that is on the main lake towards deeper water, such as this point here. You kind of have even underwater points such as this that come out a little bit deeper, that are a little bit more hidden, and if you didn't have electronics or mapping, you might not necessarily know the shape of this exactly. And then you have what is called a secondary point. So going into these coves and creeks, you'll notice you have points like here and over here and all of this. That would be classified as a secondary point, just something that is not out on the main lake. The main lake points are not as differentiated. I kind of group them more together, and then I'll focus on wind or current as far as fishing those. But the secondary points, I like to group them up into sections, and then that can help me break the lake down and make it a more manageable area to fish. So what I mean by that is, we'll use this creek here as an example. I would break this down basically into thirds. So I would say, all right, I'm going to look at the first third of this creek and check those secondary points. And then I'm also going to check like 2/3 or halfway back and put those in a section. And then I'm also going to look at the last 1/3. You'll oftentimes notice that when you start putting a pattern together, you're going to be catching the fish in one of these sections a lot better than others. You may fish the first third and you don't get a bite. You may fish the second third or halfway and you might catch a few, and then you get further back into the last 1/3 and then you really start catching them. So that would be something that I would keep noted, and then maybe go over here to this creek that sets up very similar, and I would probably just start in the last 1/3 and see if I can duplicate the results. Now that I've gone over the basics of main lake points, the secondary points, and how I classify them and kind of group them together, I will talk about key factors. Like my last videos, I'm going to group up wind and shad together, because I think a lot of times they're very dependent upon each other as far as positioning. So I'll start there. So we'll just pick a main lake point here as an example. So we'll go to this one here. So if I'm fishing this main lake point, I'm primarily going to be looking for wind hitting the point in any direction. And wherever it's hitting that point, the most direct is where I'm going to initially start. So say the wind is coming out of the west. You're going to have wind coming down and hitting this entire edge here. So this is where I'm going to start. That can help position the shad up on that bank, and you can also get away, with moving style baits a lot easier, which is a rig or a jerk bait or even throwing a crankbait. So that's where I like to start, because it's more power fishing. You don't have to be so finesse. But with that in mind, you can also have days, where the wind's just really blowing and it makes it tough to fish those points. You keep getting blown into it. You're just fighting the wind. So what I've found is sometimes it's worth going on the backside here where it is protected from the wind. And as the wind's coming across this, there's going to be a seam where you have the wind really blowing and then it goes to this slack water. And I found you can oftentimes come back here in this slack water. You could throw a jig and drag it around, or even you can throw your A-rig or crankbait, whatever you decide to throw, in that slack water or right on that seam where that wind's blowing down, and it seems like you can catch the fish doing that. So as far as secondary points, I'm basically looking at it the same way. We'll just pick this one here. So if you got wind coming in, I'm going to first focus on the wind where it is directly hitting the bank. Or, as long as there's wind going down the bank, I really do think that makes a big difference and just makes it easier to catch the fish than just having, a slack water type day. So that's how I'm going to approach that with wind. And as far as the shad go, yes, the wind is going to help position them, but you also need to remember that in the wintertime, yes, your shad are grouped up, but they're not all just going to be on the main lake. They're not all just going to be on the secondary points. They can be throughout this. So what I would recommend doing is graphing your main lake points or graphing your way into these creeks and checking some secondary points as you're going. And keep an eye also just when you're out in the guts in the middle of them. And keep an eye for shad, because you'll notice that you're going to find them either, maybe a little bit closer to the main lake, or you might find them halfway back or all the way back. So just keep that in mind. And that is another factor to help dissect which part of these coves and creeks that I'm going to initially focus on. And then from there, after I catch a few fish, they usually tell you a little bit of a story and a little bit of pattern of what you need to be doing. So then I can, formulate a better game plan from there. The next thing I want to talk about is current. And I know that wind has its current in itself, especially if you have a nice wind, it can generate basically its own current. But in this regard, I'm referring to the dam. So if they're generating electricity, or if the floodgates are open, they're drawing the lake down to get water move through. If say Truman's high, or they just need to get water out expecting spring rain, you're going to have current through this lake. And it's not going to be immediate as soon as they start generating or open the gates. That's just going to turn right into a river. But after they have it going for a while, and if they have good generation and good flow through, it definitely has current and will help position the fish. So we'll use this here as an example. So you have your main river channel going through the lake here, and we'll use this point that sticks out. And as you can tell here, you have your contour lines a lot closer together. So this is indicating a steeper drop, almost like a little bit of a shelf. Now, bass are going to position themselves into the current. So they're going to be facing this point. They're going to be facing towards the west. And they're going to be oftentimes behind a break line or some sort of structure to help stay out of the current, so they don't have to exert so much energy. But it's also, food is going to get passed down to them, and they can just sit there kind of like a buffet line. So, if they were generating heavy and I was fishing this point, I would focus on this area here with the structure, this little drop off, and try and drag, a jig towards them, or throw your A-rig and let it ride closer to the bottom, things like that. The current will also have a great effect in your coves. The fish and the shad, they may be grouped up, closer to the back, and then say they start generating a lot of current. They haven't been generating for a while, but suddenly they start. That tends to pull the fish out a little bit more towards the main lake. They're going to gradually kind of work their way out. Like I said, it's not just going to be an instantaneous type thing, but you may notice throughout the day or after, say a few days of them really running water, that the fish are going to set up a little bit different and probably be closer to the main lake and kind of group up on some of the secondary points, or even out on the main lake more so than they were. The next key factor I'll talk about, and I'll kind of go to the mid-lake, little change of scenery here, is what I call the angle of attack. So when you're fishing your points, you can position your boat out here in the deeper water, cast up, drag it out. You can position on the sides and go across it. You can go over here and do the same thing. Or you can park your boat up here in the shallower water, cast out in the deeper water, and bring your bait uphill. So you may notice, if you experiment with this, you may catch them better doing one thing than the other. You may fish 5 points with your boat out here in the deeper water casting up, and you might do all right. and then you decide, well, I'm going to actually park up here and cast out, and you start catching them a lot better going up the hill. And that can be, for a few reasons. Number one, if it's more like a high pressure type day and they're just finicky, a little bit picky eaters that day, they might want it presented in a specific way, for them to bite it. You may also find sometimes that the fish may be deeper than you expected, and maybe your boat was actually parked almost on top of the fish. So you come out to the shallower water, and now you're putting your bait in the strike zone. But if that's the case, and you notice that the fish are out deeper than you anticipated, you can always go to your next point that sets up similar, such as this, and maybe keep your boat further off and focus on the deeper water and see if you get more bites, or if you need to come back up to the shallower portion and then cast out deeper and kind of drag your bait uphill. If you find a good main lake point and the fish are there and you're fishing it from one direction and you're like, I'm just not getting a bite, try changing it up, and you'll be surprised that sometimes that's all that it takes to get them to bite. And usually once you get one to bite, there's more there. Another thing I look for is anything to differentiate your main lake point or secondary point from the rest of the points on the lake. Because let's be honest, you zoom out and look at this lake, it's just loaded with points. They're everywhere. So I'm looking for things like additional structure, such as a creek channel or a flat, or additional cover, which would basically be brush piles, rock piles, or docks. Those are going to be your main things you're going to find at Lake the Ozarks. Let's just zoom in here to the glaze. I think I talked about this creek maybe in my channel swing video, but as you can see, you have a nice channel swing that comes up and it goes right up onto this little secondary point. That'd be something I would key in on. Look for brush piles on this. That's just an advantage of this secondary point. You're probably going to have bigger busted up rock here. You have a little bit better access to deep water, like a smaller drop off. It's something that can just help hold the fish. It's different than any other, just plain old secondary point. It's probably a rock change nearby where it goes from the chunk rock to more of a gravel. It's just things like that can really set things apart. All right, I'll find another example here of something. This is a really popular point, but this is just an example too. You have your main river channel here on the main lake that swings up really hard to this. You get a nice long point that sticks out, and as you can see, has a very large flat here. And on top of these flats, I like to look for brush piles, things like that the fish will definitely relate to. They're very close to deep water. They can pull up onto the flats and feed and stay in the brush piles, and have plenty of cover there. Here's another example of one that has a nice big flat, maybe even some rock piles over here. Usually the flats signify a hard bottom. All right, let's go down a little bit more to the mid-lake region, and we'll talk about docks on some of these points. So here's a secondary point with a dock on it. Has multiple docks. So these are type of situations where I'm looking at the docks and I'm going to try and find one with brush piles around them or rock piles or anything that's sunk around it, just to make that dock stand out from all the other docks. Here is kind of a point with some wave breaks. This would be something you can fish for suspended fish around, jerk baits, A-rigs. A lot of times these big wave breaks have cables that come down really far and they anchor them, and there'll actually be fish suspended around those. Fair word of warning, they will snag your baits and you're not getting your bait back on that usually. A little bit bigger commercial dock that sticks out. This would be something that you can really fish around and pick your way through it. There'll be definitely fish suspended up underneath this, especially out over this deeper water. I tend to find that I catch a lot more spots doing this, over the deeper water suspended, but I have caught a fair share of largemouth, some of them big, some of them not, but it tends to be a lot more spotted bass, in my experience, at least out in these deeper docks that extend. So there are many things to consider and look at with all these secondary points, being additional cover or additional structure nearby just to help set them apart. And then with that, I also have just general bottom composition. So if you go somewhere in the back of the creeks, you might find that some of them have more of a mud silt bottom, where other places will have more rock. And in my experience, I'm usually going to do better on a little bit rockier bottom than I would on a mud bottom. If you find, say an area that has a lot of mud, like in the whole cove, like a lot of the points and stuff are generally more of a soft bottom and muddier. And then you find, like, say this point here, you found like a rock patch. That would definitely be something that I would key in on, as just a simple bottom change like that and hardness can really, be a key factor in where those fish are going to be. So if you find something like that on your side imaging, or you're just graphing around and you notice that, definitely mark it. A lot of times on those rock bottoms, you can sometimes see the fish on your side imaging. It just depends how sensitive you have your unit turned up. Final thing I want to touch on is just the baits, and to be honest with you, they're pretty much the exact same things that I've used for the channel swing videos and the bluff end video. So I'll just start with the old classic A-rig, which, like I've talked about before, is basically power fishing in the wintertime. I have a whole video based on it if you want to know more about how I set them up, things like that. This is something that you can just cover a lot of water with. You can throw it from all different angles across the points and catch either suspended fish or catch fish on the bottom with that. So that's usually what I like to start with, especially if it's got some wind blowing on it. Another good thing is just a jerk bait. This is a Mega Bass in Ozarks shad color. This is a new one I'm going to try. It's a Jenko, actually, in their Pro Blue color. So I have yet to throw this, but that'll be something to try for me. You can also throw like a single swim bait on just a head. Throw that over brush piles along the bottom. Slow roll it. All sorts of things. Then I've got the classic jigs. These are just jigs that I hand tie. This is a full style jig in like Ozark craw color. This is a finesse jig, 7/16, just hand tied. I usually pair that with my favorite, the Crocodile ring craw in the colder months. Once again, we have no affiliation with them, but I do want to have a little shout out to Crocodile. Jim Dill, he sent us a few baits. I think they were all ring craws. I'm not 100% sure. They were actually sent to my cousin's house, but he sent those to us. So big shout out to Jim. I'll definitely have to say something to you, say hi to you, and thank you when I see you next time at the lake, even though you probably don't know who I am, but thank you. And you compare that with also like a shaky head and the ring craw or the swamp bug that Crocodile makes, or any of your other favorites. Soft plastics would work, whatever you want to use, but pretty much the same winter style type baits. Not much changes as far as that goes. It's just location on the lake is just your biggest factor. Hopefully this video will help you understand and break down Lake the Ozarks a little bit better as far as main lake points, secondary points, even the channel swing and bluff end videos. I know it can be a little overwhelming sometimes looking at all the information and being like, wow, where do I start? There's so many ways I can go with this. And something that has helped me over the years is looking at the weather conditions, such as the wind. I try and pick a part of the lake that has a lot of areas that I think will benefit from, just say, the wind direction. We'll use that as the example. And I will focus on that part, and I will try and just break down that section into, one of these patterns, whether it's points or creek channel banks or bluff ends. I'm going to explore those options and just focus on that small section of the lake, because if you start running around all over the place, sometimes you get like scatterbrain and you get spun out, and you end your day of fishing, say it was a poor day of fishing, and you look back and you're like, man, I never really focused in on what I wanted to do. I never, I didn't explore these options all the way. I just tried, maybe one little thing, and I was like, oh, it's not working, so I completely scrapped it. Where if you just dive into it a little bit more and maybe break things down and really think about it, it can help you establish a pattern, and then you'll just have a more successful day on the water and catch more fish and ultimately have more fun. So that's something that has just helped me over the years, break down the lake, and not even just like the Ozarks, just anywhere you go, just try and take it and break it down to the smallest high percentage areas where you think you will succeed. And I normally would start off fishing your strengths. If you're really good at fishing deeper water offshore, start with that. If you're better off as a shallow water fisherman, try and do something a little bit geared towards that. But hopefully these videos have helped you, and we're definitely going to have some more content coming up. I would like to do some graphing videos, some other technique videos. Hopefully the weather warms up. It's been like super cold this whole week, and next week's not looking too much better. So hopefully the temperature starts on the uptrend and you can actually go out and apply some of these winter techniques. But until then, we'll just keep holding on, waiting for spring. So I hope you guys enjoy the videos. We definitely thank all of you for watching it, and stay tuned for some more videos.